What's up, guys? Today we have a clip of Nick Fuentes debating Candace Owens on race, IQ, culture, and interracial marriage.
By the way, you can say whatever you want on your show, but I would just encourage you to maybe sometimes think people are just not where you're at sometimes. And I have to check myself at times. And I think
No one's around that.
I think having the exercise.
I'm in the future.
Okay. You're with Ye in the future. Ye somewhere in the future.
I'm 5 years ahead.
So let me ask you some of these questions. So you do have ideas that there shouldn't be interracial marriage.
Mhm.
I've seen those clips. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, it's not that I don't think there should be interracial marriage. I'm Catholic, so as you know, it's not a sin to be in an interracial marriage or relationship. But I am racist, I would say. I believe in the races. I believe there are white people and black people and Hispanics and Asians, and I think that it's a core part of our identity. It's who we are. And there's like this conservative reflex to say, we're colorblind. Race doesn't mean anything. And, you know, Pat Buchanan said this. He said, it's not everything, but it isn't nothing. And I definitely lean more towards the latter, which is it really is a core part of who we are. Our culture, our heritage, our ancestors, our customs, all of it. You know, it's not that I don't think that two people can fall in love from different races. Of course they can. And they have throughout history. And the races have mixed throughout history and assimilated. But for someone like myself, I always say on my show, it's just my value. I want to marry someone that looks like me, that comes from a similar background, because I want my kids to look like me. I want my grandkids to look like me.
But are you, sorry, I just want to make sure, did you say I'm a racialist or I'm a
You know, for a long time, I would say I'm racialist. Now I just say I'm racist.
Okay, so when you say you're racist, because these definitions get changed around, racist, anti-Semitism gets expanded. What do you mean when you say I'm a I think most people watching this would go, if you are a racist, the traditional sense of the term, why are you on this podcast, right? Wouldn't you just go, you know what, Candace is black and she's therefore I don't want to speak to her.
Right.
Certainly not going onto your show and saying, why won't Candace have me on? That doesn't really seem to line up with the traditional sense of the idea racist. So
yeah, and I'm using it, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek. I mean, for the purpose of understanding, I'd say my views are I'm a racialist. But I do think that we need to deconstruct this idea of racism in the sense that, you know, look, you're black, I'm white. It is what it is. For my entire life, people have been walking around on eggshells about the subject of race, about white people being racist. Can I say this? Can I say that? Can I have this opinion? And me, I'm sort of, you know, Gavin McInnes said it like this. He said, you're kind of post-racist. You're sort of after this craze where everything was racist. It's sort of this recognition that we live in a heavily racial world. And, you know, look, sometimes we have racist feelings. Racist feelings like I want to live in a white neighborhood. I don't want to live in a black neighborhood. If they were all like you, obviously it'd be a different story. But when we think of a black neighborhood, we know what that means and why the property value is cheap.
But that's black American. So this is why I want to understand this idea better because, and this is kind of something my cousin has said, which I guess you could say is a racist statement, but she says that white people in America are the white trash of white people in the world, meaning that like there's a special category of uniquely that you don't see when you're dealing with like white Americans here, that if you went across to just, like Switzerland, you wouldn't see this version of a white person necessarily, or this, you maybe went to the continent of Africa, you don't see this version of a black person either. Like even if you went to to the tribes out in Africa that still exist, they would be a far cry from a black American living in a neighborhood in Compton, right? So I'm trying to understand if you think that it's all black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored by, this is what's going on in America, this has failed for 1,000 reasons. Welfarism has definitely, black people in 1940s, stand up. My grandfather, I talk about that denigration and the corrosion of culture. Yeah. That's happening. White, black, whatever you want to name it, there is this intentional corrosion of culture. So do you think it's literally, well, this is just what a black person is when they come out? Or do you think that post-welfare, LBJ, Great Society, this is what black Americans have become, and I have a right to respond to that and say that as a white man, I don't want to live there?
Well, I think it's more nature than people would like to believe. There's this classic tension of, is it nature, is it nurture, is it cultural, or is it intrinsic, is it racial? And I've always been on the latter side of this among conservatives. Conservatives like to say it's all culture. Black America is the way it is because of hip hop music and the Great Society and that kind of stuff. And I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic. One of the big arguments against the abolition of slavery in the 1860s is that when Europeans colonized Africa, they hadn't discovered the wheel. There's no two-story buildings. There's no writing. There's no written language. Missionaries had to go to Africa in the last century and invent it for the African people because there's no recorded history. They didn't have writing.
So Egypt is not in Africa.
Well, Egypt is a different race. The Egyptians were not black.
Okay, but you said when they went to Africa, so I just want to...
The interior of Africa in the late 19th century, scrambled for Africa.
Okay, so we're now knocking Egypt out of Africa.
Well, Egypt is part of northern Africa, sub-Saharan Africa.
You said Africa, so I'm not trying to get a gotcha. I'm just responding. You're saying Africa.
Sure. Yeah.
It's in Africa. It's Egypt. It's kind of ridiculous to say there was no written language.
Well,
so I'm just trying to get you to
sure. Egyptians are not Africans.
If I'm not pushing back, the internet will. So
Egyptians are not racial Africans. When I say African, I'm saying sub-Saharan Africans.
Sub-Saharan, okay.
Black people because it is a different race. In sub-Saharan Africa, and Europeans did not penetrate that until the late 19th century. They didn't have any of this. To the extent that you have infrastructure in Africa, it's from the Muslims in the Sahel and the Maghreb in northern Africa, where the Arabs colonized. And then you had, Carthage and Egypt. You had ancient civilizations. But sub-Saharan Africa, they didn't have that. You take these people out of that land and put them here, and they're enslaved people. You let them free in a modern, liberal republic. They're not going to succeed. It's not going to go well for them. And that was one of the arguments against abolition. People said if you free them without any assimilation, without any kind of process for them to be acclimated, they're going to die. And that's exactly what happened. Many of the bottom 10% of the lowest IQ Africans just died off for generations. And it had pardon the expression, but it had a eugenic effect because over time, if the weakest are dying off, that's one argument for why blacks in America have a standard deviation higher IQ than the blacks in sub-Saharan Africa. So, so I do believe there is something intrinsic going on there. And what makes people uncomfortable about this is the idea that it's unchangeable. There's something about, and this is why I'm a Catholic, we do have an inherent desire for universalism. We do believe that there's a common humanity and a common human community and all of that. We hate the idea that we're born a certain way and we can never change. And that's just the way it is. And we even think about this in terms of, it's become not so popular these days to tell children, you can be whatever you want to be. Because we know that's not the case. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are smart, some dumb, some ugly, some handsome. That's why, by the way, incel-dumb is a big part of this also.
So you believe these are immutable characteristics that are assigned at birth?
I think that, yes.
For the most part.
Things like race, all those attributes are immutable and unchangeable,
But they have changed. Just factually speaking, they have changed.
They change over time, over the generations.
Okay, so then you don't think it's immutable. Because if this was an immutable characteristic,
individual person.
Okay, so you're saying that if you are born at this space and time as a black person in America, here is the cards that you're dealt with and you can't change that over time.
Something like IQ does not change. No, doesn't change wildly. It only changes genetically over. IQ is a big one, and that's a genetic trait. And so that can change over the generations, but you can't take an individual that's 75 IQ, which is the average in West Africa, and take them to 100.
So two dumb people can't produce a smart person.
I believe they can, actually.
Yeah.
But...
So does that kind of debunk your...
No, because it's rare that happens, but IQ is a heritable trait, so it's unlikely that happens.
Okay.
And do you not recognize that there's group differences in IQ? Or?
I think that there's group differences, but okay. I wouldn't say, and the reason why I'm pushing back on this is because those perspectives that you hold, Thomas Sowell did a really good job debunking that. And I think the book is called Intellectuals and Race, and he opens up and makes a very sound argument that these characteristics are not immutable and that it can be your environment. And he kind of goes back and discusses who had the highest IQ and who now has the highest IQ. And so I just disagree with you fundamentally, but you have a right to have that perspective.
So you don't think that there's group differences on average between the races?
I think, just to be clear, I think there would be group differences if you took like we were talking about, an American versus somebody who graduates college in Europe. There'd be tremendous differences. Not
tremendous, but there would be slight differences.
Yeah.
But you don't think that racially there's differences between races?
I think, because we have huge differences culturally. So going to your point of saying, I don't want to live in a black neighborhood, well, neither does LeBron James when he gets money, right?
Right.
And there's a reason for that,
Mhm.
because there is something that's happening culturally in Black America that's been going on for a very long time. But that thing, I would argue, didn't exist in...
What about in Africa and Haiti? I mean, they're killing and eat each other in Africa and Haiti. Everywhere where they are, you have these problems.
Yeah, I'd like to look into, and I'm pleading ignorant, but I've heard some things about what happened in Haiti and what the Clinton Foundation did there. So I think I'd have to look more into the history of Haiti to be able to push back on that at all. I don't think I agree with that.
What about all of Africa then? There's not one country in sub-Saharan Africa that's successful. Not one. They're all least developed countries. They're all failed states.
This kind of reminds me, and we could kind of flesh out this conversation together, and I'm not perhaps ready to have it fully, but I do remember going back to Dave Smith where he was conceding a point on, well, all of these other Middle Eastern countries, no, you wouldn't want to live there. You'd want to live in Israel. In my mind, I'm going, well, because you just keep bombing the crap out of them if they ever try to get ahead. I remember watching this clip of him saying that, going, why don't these countries get ahead? And kind of going back in my mind to the Gaddafi speech where he was speaking essentially about, here's what we got to do in Libya to get ahead. Here's what we're going to do with the dollar, and we're going to be progressive and this and...
Yeah. Okay, a bunch of excuses. We get it, Candace. You're Black, so you have to defend them. But the thing is, nobody's dropping bombs on Africa, Haiti, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic. These are choices. And you can clearly see she's arguing with emotions. But what Nick is saying is not that Black people are inferior, but just we have differences, And to not recognize them and just pretend we are all equal and we are all the same, it's pathetic. It's the same as the leftists pretending women can be men and men can be women.
That, and they killed him. And then what happened to those Libyan refugees? Suddenly they're now pouring into, just like he said was going to happen, that they were now pouring into the European continent, and Europeans are complaining, who are these people? And so the question is, are we allowing, because I'm like, Africa's a pretty rich country. Like, why aren't Africans controlling the diamond trade? Who's taking all of the diamonds so that they can't control the diamond trade? And how long have these people been doing that, being essentially culture vultures? That's kind of the journey that I've been on now in terms of really trying to go back and look into history to see what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I never trust myself when I have a perspective now, because I realize how much of my opinions and beliefs were shaped by the public school system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think you're right. I think that there has been a very sophisticated effort to, just like you would say now, in terms of people that are intentionally attacking Anglo-Saxons. I'm just learning about that there were these books that were written to, we must genocide the Anglo-Saxons, that were going on for a lot longer than I realized. History didn't begin with World War II. But I think it would take a lot of time to kind of unpack that.
Yeah.
Like, are we stopping people from getting ahead just because, I don't know?
That just sounds, being honest with you, that just sounds to me like a left-wing argument when they say, why don't these countries get ahead? Colonialism, you're a colonizer. It's like, okay, but when we got there, they had no development. When we got to Africa, they had no technological development.
So you think that even if we weren't at war... And sure, you could say that you think that's a leftist argument. I would only push back on that because I've learned so much about just like recent history that I didn't know. But you think that the Middle East, like if we had done nothing in terms of the Middle East, that they would just be savages and just be like, America didn't do anything it doesn't set anything backwards, and you're just like bombing a place.
Yeah. Kind of. I think that we did set them back because when they don't have political order, it prevents development and investment and things like that. But, again, when you look at the antecedents of all these, the history didn't start, like you said, with World War II in the 20th century. There's a reason that European civilization created this enormous gap between them and everybody else. And I don't think it was that it was white supremacy or it was unfair or something like that. I think it's because Europeans are smarter. I think that on average, Europeans are smarter. So to use
your argument against you, that could be said about Ashkenazis. So if you're sitting here saying, I believe in some conspiracy and that it's a coordinated effort and blah, 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 they could look at you and say, that's a leftist argument. We're just smarter.
I think they are smart.
They are smart. Smarter. They're the smartest.
Well, I would say this. I would say they're probably as smart as the smartest white race. But the difference between the Jews and the white people is that they work as a team. And so if you look at, for example, things like transportation, white people invented every mode of transportation, railroad, cars, airplanes, all of it. When you look at fields of knowledge, white people invented all that, chemistry, anthropology, all that stuff. So white people really did give birth to the modern world in a major way. Jewish people are high verbal IQ because they're lawyers, they're rabbis. That's what a rabbi is a lawyer. That's what the Talmud is. It's a lawyerly back and forth. And so they're skilled at some things, and you're not wrong. They're extremely educated, they're extremely intelligent. They're a unique case where, 2% of the population overrepresented 2,000%. Are they 2,000% smarter? Answer is no. Because if you look at the standardized testing, the top scores in the high school standardized tests are almost all Asians in math and science. Asians aren't overrepresented in power. It's Jewish people. So Jewish people are not, proportionally as more intelligent as they are more overrepresented. And that goes to their real superpower, which is they're an organized minority. An organized minority will be the disorganized majority. As far as Africa is concerned, they didn't have the wheel. We got there, they didn't have the wheel. And it's unfortunate. It's not anything that people are happy about. I don't believe that makes Africans inferior. But I do think that explains their relative level of development that has been persistent over centuries, millennia.
Yeah, I would probably just disagree with that point altogether. Okay, so then at least you are agreeing that Jewish people are just born smarter.
Yeah, but, until now, she's just disagreeing without bringing any argument against him. Like, what is this? Yeah, we'll just disagree all the way. About what? Because going back to the argument of the Africans being the victims, bro, I'm gonna be honest, other than the fact that Nick brought up, which is when we went there as Europeans, nothing was there already, It's not like we destroyed everything that was there. No, there was nothing. That's why we were able to take power. I'm not saying it was good or bad, I'm just saying what happened. And the same people that sold African slaves were African leaders, because they got rich from it. They sold them to the Jews and Muslims 1,000 years even before we went there. So this victimism doesn't make any sense, especially because the Muslims conquered half of the African continent and they're still there, but you don't see Africans or Afro-Americans, blacks in general, complaining about it. Why? Because they're a little bit brown. Literally, if you look at the map, half of the African continent, all North Africa, is Arabs. They're not Africans. But nobody's complaining about that, right? Because they're brown.
Very high IQ. I don't know that they're smarter than white people, but they're...
That's what the results say.
That's what some results say. Depends on what results you're looking at.
Okay. I thought that was kind of the saying that Jewish people are just born smarter.
Yeah, they're very high IQ. I don't know that they're smarter than white people, but they're...
That's what the results say.
That's what some results say. Depends on what results you're looking at.
Okay. I thought that was kind of the... maybe I'm just reading it in one term, but I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that Ashkenazis have the highest IQs.
They like to embellish that, and there's different kinds of IQ. I think Chinese people probably have the highest IQ, Chinese or Japanese.
But how do you pick and choose what you believe and what you don't believe and then form a basis? I definitely believe that black people are dumb, but I totally don't necessarily believe, I'm obviously being a little bit hyperbolic here, but I totally don't necessarily believe that Ashkenazis are the smartest. How do you...
Well, I said they're probably among the smartest races. As to who's the smartest, it's tough to say. And I think that Jewish people do embellish that for obvious reasons. Now, there are some studies that say that Ashkenazi Jews do have the highest average IQ, and that does exist.
Yeah, but so then for me, the reason why I'm skeptical of it all, to be honest with you, is because I'm skeptical of history full stop, right? So when you're like, well, this is what we did.
What do you mean, all of history? Or
skeptical of history full stop, because we're living in a present right now where they're lying about what happened yesterday. And then when I realized, when you completely remove something that would obviously inform our perspectives in a different way, as I covered on my show this week, the Havara agreement between the Zionists and the Nazis, that's kind of a pretty big thing to not teach people in school, that would maybe inform and make us ask some questions. When you totally remove a German genocide and only focus on one genocide, or don't focus on speaking about the Bolshevik Revolution, I now have a lot of questions about history full stop. And so he who prints the textbook is king.
Agreed.
And so if you are coming up with a concept this is an immutable trait, and I know because I read or I learned this at school, or this textbook, or I read this book, he who prints the textbook is king. And I'm kind of learning that right now in terms of Hollywood Babylon, the relationship that the deep state has had with publishing agencies for a reason. You know this, I know this. You can't even get your book published.
Right.
If you want to get your book published because they're controlling the press, that's kind of been a running theme. Certainly was the reason why the Russian Tsar, they were pamphleteers at that time, but like certainly was the reason that he got overthrown was that they realized the power of the press. And so when people have perspectives like you and they're base it on like historical knowledge, this person invented the wheel, I'm like, I don't really know what's up and what's down, to be honest with you. I don't even believe in the moon landing.
Tartaria.
So, there you go. There's another one. There's something there. That's very funny. I would.
Not kidding.
But the point being is that, yeah, so the more that I learn, the one thing that I learn is that we know very little. And so I would never make a sweeping conclusion like that confidently. It could be that some groups are more evil. They're willing to do stuff that you wouldn't do. They're willing to take your entire culture, your ideas, and purport that it was theirs. And that's something that we're kind of tackling in my book club right now, because we're realizing that the elites very much believed in this sort of Kabbalistic sexual ritual magic, but actually they stole it from Egyptians. And like Sigmund Freud was obsessed with the Egyptians, and we talked about Aleister Crowley. And so the more I learn about what they were obsessed with, I'm like, okay, so you're supposed to be like the brightest people in the world and you've had wealth forever. But I think you're willing to do more that most people that just have like a discerning, I don't know, just have the Holy Spirit, like, just wouldn't do. And so does the most evil person get to the top? And then they get to say, well, we're just like what's going to happen, for example, bring it back to what we've been discussing. And I will give a specific example. I won't even mince words here. It shocked me to learn that Armand Hammer, you know Armand Hammer, the actor?
Yeah.
He is racially Jewish. I know sometimes it's race, sometimes it's ethnicity, sometimes it's religion, who knows? But Armie Hammer's family backstory is that his however many great-grandfathers named Armand Hammer was named Arm and Hammer, literally, okay? Because he was considered Stalin and Vladimir Lenin's favorite Jew, okay? Fascinating. And so what he would do is he would go between Russia and America. He would set up like all of these, his father was Julius Hammer, and he established the Diamond District. So you're telling me that when Christians were being mass murdered and their belongings were being taken, you got these guys going back and forth, establishing districts in America. They're peddling art. He started peddling art. He started peddling diamonds. I think that's stolen, okay? So if our American history is going to teach us that, like, oh, like the reason they established Armand Hammer's fortune is like they opened all these art galleries, it's stolen. You stole this from Christians that were being murdered and had all their stuff taken. We can apply that logic to what's happening in Palestine. Everyone thinks about, okay, it's very clearly what's happening is an ethnic cleansing. Where's all that stuff going? Are we going to in the future go, well, Palestinians just couldn't get ahead because, you know, they're just not that smart. You know, fundamentally, if you look at the IQ of Palestinian, the reason why they got ahead is because they weren't that smart and the Israelis were just really smart, or no, the Israelis were just evil. And so I am not comfortable with the conclusion that you have arrived at because I just pay attention to what's happening now and what limited research that I've done. I'm like, well, some people are just a little more evil. Like, they'll rewrite the books and 50, maybe 100 years from now, they're going to say the Palestinians never had that land. And it was really a matter of people lying, and it was anti-Semitic, and we'll be none the wiser.
Right.
Fair?
I disagree. I just fundamentally disagree. I think that, you know, it's such a one-sided, it's unfortunate, but it's so one-sided, just a chronic lack of development and persistent underclass status and lack of contributions to mankind. I mean, certainly in the arts and in athletics, but no inventions, no philosophers, no true great masterpieces, anything like that, in terms of fine art, really. And then you have the whole planet is like this, you know? I mean, if half of Africa was super developed or halfway developed and the other half wasn't, maybe you'd have an argument, but it's whether they're socialist or capitalist, whether they got colonized or not, whether they got freed from slavery in 1800 or in 1860, or it's the same story everywhere. There's not one written language among them. You know, you talk about who controls the printing press. They don't have books. They don't have words to put in the books. And I think that, you know, it's a sad fact of the world, but it's something we have to deal with. And to me, that's the only conclusion that satisfies. And don't get me wrong, I get where you're coming from. I'm not, you know, I'll give you an example. My family lived in Chicago for 4 or 5 generations. And my parents and my grandmother They had a security firm in the city. They taught cops and security guards how to shoot their guns and gave them licenses and things like that. And almost all their clientele were black. And when I was growing up, this was impressed upon me at an early age. They always said the older generations in Chicago, when my grandmother was growing up in the projects, when my parents were running this business in the 80s and 90s, they said they were the most polite, the most pious, the most considerate. Right. Some of them couldn't read, though. They would come in and not be able to read, but they were less dysfunctional than my family. My grandmother, her mother had mental illness, and she would look outside the window in the projects and see a black family across the way, and they were sitting around the table holding hands saying grace, and it was an intact family. So I completely agree with you. So, obviously, there's a cultural destruction. Obviously, there's a cultural decline, but I think that was constant, even though the older generation was more genteel. I think that, honestly, that came from oppression. That came from a society where they were the minority. There was racism, there was abuse, there was segregation, and I think that made black people meek. And if you look, the out-of-wedlock birth rate started to blow up, not after Great Society in the late 60s, but in the 50s during the Civil Rights era. And I think that was sort of a regression to the mean moment. And again, I think that it's not that black people can't be good people. There aren't smart black people, or there aren't, incredible black people. I'm sitting across from one right now, or yay, and everything like that. But on the whole, on average, and there's billions of black people, they do have that lower level of development, and I think that's why they underperform. And
Yeah, I think it's totally ignorant. We can disagree on that, but I think it would be the same as saying, like, we look at women today.
Bro, what the fuck? She just disagrees without any argument. Like, it's just emotions and feelings. Well, these people did this and these people did that. So maybe it was because they did that these people are like this. Come on. Like, it just explained clearly how it is. It's not hating on black people. It's just saying the truth. Stop coping.
All a bunch of hoes. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of just become the thing. Like, this is what women are. And then kind of looking at this moment in time and saying, like, this is just who they are. It's like women, as soon as they come of age, they just want to be on screen shaking their butts because they're all low IQ and they need men to do this or whatever. It's like, no, the culture has been corroding for a very long time. And I don't accept the argument that it's because women are women and that's just who they all are deep down on the inside. I find that I do think that in time you might move away from that.
Okay. I'm open-minded. Yeah.
We'll see. Okay. So you are a racist. You accept that. You are I don't like actually using that word because even that is what I mean, like trickery, where it's like Semitic. Palestinians are Semitic. Right. So it's nothing more anti-Semitic than blowing up Palestinians. Are you a Jew hater?
No, I don't hate anybody.
Do you hate Jews?
I don't hate Jews. I don't hate anybody.
You don't hate anybody? Mm-hmm. Okay. And your faith, you don't find that saying that you're a Catholic while also saying that you don't believe that whites and blacks should be married, or you don't believe in interracial marriage for whatever reason, that doesn't conflict with your Catholicism?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, but you said that that's not a Catholic perspective.
It's not a sin. The Catholic Church doesn't say it's a sin to mix races, but there have been various Catholic authors that have said that it's not conducive to a long-term marriage to mix races because you have this clash, you have this dissonance between cultures, between different upbringings. And so they say if the selfless goal of a marriage is to rear children and you want to make that as conducive as possible, then you should marry within your race. It's not a sin if you don't.
Which Catholic author?
I don't know off the top of my head, but there are Catholic theologians that have said that. It's not conducive to a long-term marriage and stable.
Okay, jumping in here, even though he didn't say that he would produce a document, I thought it was important to fact-check this one, obviously, because I don't want people to walk away with a perspective that it's a Catholic teaching or a Catholic idea or Catholic theology that people shouldn't be marrying outside of their race. So I gave him an opportunity and told him it was important to me if he could supply us with the name or the reading. He came back with that we were able to fact check as being an accurate quotation from Thomas Aquinas. The quotation reads, "It is less fitting to marry one who is far removed from us in customs and manners, lest the mutual fellowship be hindered." Doesn't say anything about race. I certainly don't disagree with that whatsoever. And so I am not clear on how that could be interpreted as being about race. But again, the only reason I wanted to fact check that is because it's really important for people who are obviously having faith-based discussions to know that that is not a Catholic perspective. All right, let's get back into the conversation.
And by the way, the statistics bear this out. There's more mental illness, more domestic abuse in mixed race households. It depends on which ones. Some are worse than others in terms of the statistics. But obviously, I mean, look, at the end of the day, elephant in the room is you're a black woman in a mixed marriage. So obviously we have different beliefs on this.
If we don't, listen, I'm never going to obviously adopt your beliefs on it. I just think it's patently wrong.
But do you understand why I would want to have grandchildren that are white?
I don't have an issue with you saying you want your kids to look like you.
But do you understand why I would believe that or feel that way?
No, because I'm not white. I don't understand.
What about your grandchildren being black for that matter then?
Well, I'm mixed race, so that I just feel like each kid comes out looking different. It's kind of incredible. So I think that when you actually have children, you realize like it's incredible how like my daughter is a little bit darker, but she looks like my husband. And then like my son's whiter, but he looks just like me. And I think that's kind of one of the exciting parts of being in a mixed race relationship. I'm always like, oh, I wonder what this kid's going to come out looking like. If you're saying that generations down, like 3 generations down, it'd be possible that you could just have all black kids or something, would that bother you? You'll probably be dead. Before that happens, you'll probably be dead.
I'm alive now, and I
no.
don't
But
love
I'm
the
saying
idea.
is that like by the time you could breed it out, so to speak, you'd be dead. So I'm just answering your question. Like it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
No, obviously not.
I'm saying, but do you understand why I would feel that way?
If I understood it, I wouldn't be in a mixed race relationship. I don't understand it.
But you have
I
no
accept
empathy
it.
then for like,
No.
you can't step outside of your situation.
I mean, no, I'm not. I don't need to have. How would I have empathy for it? I mean, I don't feel that way.
Okay.
So it's just something that we disagree on.
Well, I'm saying that because I actually can understand the appeal of a mixed race relationship. I get it. I mean, I find other races attractive also. And, if I was in love with a person from another race, I would probably want to build a life with them also. But my values are not just who I'm in love with and things like that. It's also my heritage, my identity, my race. And, I like the idea. It is important to me. My parents look a certain way. Their parents look a certain way. We come from a certain place. I like the unbroken chain. And I want my grandchildren and great-grandchildren to have a similar complexion. I want them to have similar hair. Because these kinds of things, they echo. We're all connected, not just in time horizontally, but vertically across the generations. And so the idea that, 2 or 3 generations down the line, one of my children bears no resemblance to me at all, it's almost as if we're not related. It's almost as if I never existed. And there's something very disturbing to me about that. And I can understand why people are okay with that. Because people have various feelings about race. They say, I don't care about my race or whatever, but I do.
Yeah, definitely. So guys, let me know in the comments what you think. If you agree with Nick or maybe you agree with Candace, leave a like and subscribe if you want to. Christ is King, and God bless.